The modern product lifecycle is more complicated than it needs to be, and almost nobody says that out loud. Here is why it got that way, and there are two reasons. The first, the whole certification heavy path, requirements, multiple bills of materials, process plans, all the formal stages, was designed in an era when each stage needed a department to run it, and a department to document it. The second reason is sharper, and it comes from people who've analyzed this industry for decades. A lot of that fragmentation exists because enterprise software vendors build their business models around locking each piece in its own system and selling you the boundary between them. But here is the thing, a startup does the same work with 3 people. So the question isn't how do we staff the giant process, it's which parts of this are real control and which parts are just handoffs and licensing boundaries we no longer need. Today I'll walk through the entire cycle from requirements to the service bomb and show you exactly where we cut time, where we cut nothing, and why the difference is everything.
Digital transformation time. Digital transformation time.
I am Sergey Irisov. I've built the engineering to production backbone for green aviation, nuclear, electronics, and automotive. Environments where you cannot fake the evidence, but where we also couldn't afford an army to produce it. So we had to get surgical about where time actually goes. 2 promises. If you're a founder, you'll understand why your production prep cycle is slow and which fixes are free. If you're a tech lead or an engineering manager, you'll get specific, stealable tactics. How we restructured people and decisions to collapse the timeline without losing traceability. Let me first show you the whole cycle, because you can't compress what you can't see. This is the full path your product takes from an idea to something you build and support. Most people only ever see a piece of it. Let me walk the whole thing once plainly, and then we'll talk about where the time hides. It starts with the requirements, what the product must do and prove. We covered why those are control system, not paperwork, in another video. Everything downstream traces back here. Requirements become a design, the CAD model. This is where engineering decides the actual geometry, the parts, how it goes together. From the design comes the EBOM, the engineering bill of materials. This is the as-designed list, every part and assembly as engineering intends them. It answers what is the product made of from a design point of view. Then the EBOM becomes the MBOM, the manufacturing bill of materials. This is the as-built view, the same product but reorganized for how you'll actually make it. It includes things the EBOM doesn't: consumables, process materials, the structure your assembly line needs. The gap between EBOM and MBOM is where a huge amount of time and conflict lives, and we'll come back to it. Next, the supply chain BOM, the view your purchasing and suppliers work from. What's bought, from whom, with what lead times and alternates. This is where the design meets reality, cost, availability, and whether your suppliers can actually make what you drew. Alongside the MBOM sits the BOP, the bill of process. Not what the product is made of, but how it's made. The sequence of operations, the work instructions, the routing on the shop floor. The MBOM is the parts. The BOP is the choreography. And finally, the service BOM, the view for the product in the field. What's maintainable, what's a spare, what gets replaced. The life cycle doesn't end when you ship. The service BOM is how you support it for years. So that's the chain: requirements, CAD, EBOM, MBOM, supply chain BOM, bill of process, service BOM. In a big company, each of those is a department with handoffs and sign-offs between every single one. and every handoff is where time goes to die. Now let's talk about cutting carefully. Before we cut anything, one source worth knowing because he frames the whole problem well. Alex Slavitsky writes the Beyond PLM blog and has spent 2 decades analyzing engineering and manufacturing software. His core argument is one I'll lean on today. The bills of materials aren't really about structure, they're about semantics and data ownership. The E-bomb, the M-bomb, the supply bomb looks like different trees, but the real difference is meaning tied to real-world constraints. And historically, that meaning got locked inside separate systems. Keep the lens as we go. The goal isn't more bombs to reconcile. It's one connected model, many views. Full reference in the description. Before any tactic, the principle that keeps you out of trouble. When people hear compress the cycle, they think skip steps. That's the fast way to fail an audit and ship something you can't reproduce. That's not what we did. Look at the chain again. There are two completely different things flowing through it. One is control. The requirements, the baselines, the traceability, the evidence. You never cut that, ever. The other is handoffs. The waiting, the re-explaining, the back and forth between people who each own one stage. That's where almost all the time actually goes, and almost none of the control. So the entire game is this: cut the handoffs, keep the control. Make stages happen in parallel and in the same room, instead of in sequence across departments. Same rigor, a fraction of the calendar. Here are the specific moves we made. Each one collapses a handoff in that chain. Still, any of them. 1. We hired design engineers who actually understand manufacturing, and we taught them our specific process capabilities. A traditional org separates the people who design from the people who know how we build. That separation creates a handoff. Design throws it over the wall, manufacturing throws it back. By putting manufacturing knowledge inside the design engineer's head, the E-bomb is born already manufacturable. We didn't skip the design for manufacture check. We moved it upstream into the person, so it doesn't need a round trip. That's the E-bomb to M-bomb gap, half closed before it opens. 2. We set design engineers and purchasing on the same floor, physically, deliberately, so that while the cut bomb is being created, the engineer is already thinking about a realistic E-bomb. Parts our actual suppliers can actually make with lead times that work, that will clear procurement review fast. In a big company, the engineer designs in isolation, hands off the bomb, and weeks later, purchasing comes back with this part has a 20-week lead time, or no supplier makes this. Then you redesign. We deleted that loop by making it a conversation at the moment of design. The supply chain reality enters the design while it's still cheap to change. 3. We brought process thinking, the BOP, into the design conversation instead of leaving it till after the M-bomb was frozen. The person who will write the work instructions has a voice while the design was still soft. So the design is shaped around how it will actually be assembled, not just how it functions. Again, not a skipped step, a step moved earlier and made concurrent. 4. And this is the deep one, because it's where most companies get the theory wrong. We kept one connected bomb backbone instead of a separate, rekeyed copies for engineering, manufacturing, and purchasing. Now the naive version of this is just convert the E-bomb into the M-bomb with some rules. And Oleg Slavitsky, who writes the Beyond PLM blog and has analyzed this space for 2 decades, is sharp about why that's a trap. His point, building on Professor Jörg Fischer's work, is that the E-bomb to M-bomb problem isn't about restructuring a tree, it's about semantics. An M-bomb isn't a reshuffled E-bomb, it's a manufacturing reality. Operations, tooling, packaging, part substitutions that simply don't exist in the engineering world. What's a part in your PLM might be a material or an SKU in your ERP. A phantom assembly in one system doesn't exist in another. Convert by blind rules, and the links are fragile. They break the moment reality shifts. So the fix isn't a better conversation script. It's keeping a connected shared model where the EBOM, MBOM, and supply chain views are linked representations of one source, not synchronized copies that drift. Shulevitsky framing is that the goal is one structure with different view options, not 5 separate BOMs you reconcile by hand. When it's connected, a change propagates. When it's copied, someone retypes it at 6 p.m. and introduces the error that fails your next audit. This is the digital thread doing real work. And notice the bigger point he makes. A lot of this fragmentation exists not because it's necessary, but because enterprise vendors build their business models around locking each BOM inside their own system. The EBOM in PLM, the MBOM in ERP, and monetizing the boundary. You're often paying in delay for someone else's licensing strategy. Now, the other half, because compression has a cliff edge. Here is where cutting will eventually destroy you, no matter how small your team. You do not cut traceability. Every requirement still has to link to design, change, and evidence. Collapse the people, never the links. You do not cut configuration control. You must always know which baseline you build against, or you can't reproduce or certify anything. You do not cut the evidence trail. An auditor doesn't care that you were lean. They care that you can prove it. You do not cut verification and validation. Moving a check earlier is good. Deleting it is how people get hurt in safety critical work. The test is simple. If removing something only removes delay, cut it. If removing it removes proof, you just bought a future catastrophe on credit. If you're a founder, the reframe is this. Your prep cycle isn't slow because your people are slow. It's slow because your structure forces sequential handoffs that a big company needed. Free. It's organizational, not technological. Put the right knowledge in the right hats. Put the right people in the same room and let one small group decide. You'll collapse weeks without spending a pound on software. If you're a tech lead, your job is to be the person who can tell the difference between a handoff and a control. Because the org will constantly pressure you to cut both, and they feel the same in the moment. Protect the links, the baselines, and the evidence like your certification depends on them, because it does. Delete everything else that's just waiting. That judgment is the whole skill. Recap. The cycle from requirements to the service BOM cut armies of people handing work down a chain. A small team wins not by skipping stages, but by collapsing the handoffs between them. Manufacturing knowledge in the designer's head, engineers and buyers on one floor, process thinking made concurrent, one connected BOM spine, and a single group that can decide. Cut the delay. Never cut the control. Get that distinction right, and 3 people can do what used to take 50 and still pass the audit. If this was useful, subscribe. I go deep on building this kind of lean audit grade operation. And in the comments, which handoff in your own cycle wastes the most time right now? Design to manufacturing, engineering to purchasing, or something else?
Digital transformation time.